Welcome to SouthSideSox Hangout, the podcast for White Sox fans from SouthSideSox.com. This week we'll chat about the Hall of Fame, Masahiro Tanaka, and our random tidbits throughout the week. Joining me this week is Hazymania and Pnoles, as I'm Slydernelson. Hazy, Pnoles, thanks for jumping on this week, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's been a news jam-packed week for White Sox fans. Obviously, the fantastic news on Wednesday, our beloved Big Hurt Frank Thomas did make it to the Hall of Fame on the first shot with 80% of the votes. It will be a very Georgia-packed Cooperstown weekend in late July as Bobby Cox was inducted from the Veterans Committee, and two of his starting pitchers in the mid-'90s, Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine, were also inducted to the Hall of Fame. Just out of curiosity, are you guys going to Cooperstown?
No, not me. I am in lockdown here in Chicagoland for the foreseeable future. So I will have to defer to the eyes and ears of those that are a little more free to travel during that particular time span.
How about you, Pnoles? Are you going?
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to. I checked what week that was going to be, and actually I'm going to be moving around that time, so there's pretty much no way I can be away that weekend.
Yeah, that's a bummer. I am going. The closest hotel I could find was 3 hours away. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Or I could just, hang out with Rhubarb in one of the daintiest hotels I've ever seen. But, so with the Hall of Fame, generally speaking, the news, the headlines are all about the players that got in. Maddux, almost unanimous, 16 votes away, or Biggio, only 2 votes away from getting the Hall of Fame. So that's not the news. That's not what's grabbing the headlines. The headlines for the Hall of Fame vote is actually about the vote and the voters themselves on how they are approaching electing baseball players into the Hall of Fame from here and into the future. And it was a fantastic article written, of course, by our editor-in-chief, Jim, in regards to when he started becoming a baseball fan, his recollection of watching Jose Canseco while shopping for spatulas was a great image. But, Jim making the point that for baseball writers that have came out and said, I will never vote for any baseball player that played during the quote-unquote steroid era, it's just insane. That you really can't do that because there have been some really messed up eras in baseball throughout the entire history of the game. That's why it's amazing. Reminds me of that whole speech that, Earl Jones had in Field of Dreams about being the blackboard, that it gets erased and gets written and gets erased again. That's why we love the game of baseball.
Baseball.
The comment section, though, it really seems to be a split on the site. There are some that are totally in the boat with Jim, that, Jim, you're absolutely right. You're preaching to the choir. I totally believe in you, man. And then there are the other side where people are like, well, hold on a second, Jim. I think you're wrong. I think voters have the right to exclude those players who are, quote-unquote, not honorable during their playing days. So, Hazy, I'll start with you. Because this is the main topic and the main headline coming from the Hall of Fame vote this past Wednesday. What are your thoughts about that view, about baseball voters excluding any players during the steroid era from future voting?
It sounds to me that these writers are trying to make the story about themselves, that they're taking the focus off of the players and taking on this holier than thou attitude. I mean, these are the same guys that weren't reporting on it while it was happening, but now that it's been outed into the public knowledge, they're climbing onto their pedestals and passing down their edicts, saying, this isn't how the game was meant to be played, and I could never allow a cheater to be into my Hall of Fame, and this, that, and the other thing. Meanwhile, someone said it. Someone in the comment thread said it best, that never mind the cokeheads and the the greenie users and the spitballers and et cetera, that all have their bronzed faces hanging on the walls in the hall. It's a little bit double standardy to me, and it makes me a little bit ill, to be perfectly honest with you.
Those are good points. Pnoles, what are your thoughts about the divide?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the same side as Jim and what I perceive to be the majority of the commenters on the site. I thought that I was like kind of cringing when reading the take on Rick Morrissey's column. It just seems completely inequitable to take this stance and not evaluate people on an individual basis. I think that we kind of right off the bat on that comment thread got a long comment from Mike Honorama that took a pretty aggressive stance against Jim's article, and in Jim's reply he kind of draws a line between Bonds and Clemens and guys that there's a lot of concrete evidence against and have on occasion acted like jerks about the whole thing, and then there's people like Biggio, Bagwell, and Piazza who are kind of getting thrown into the fire along with them. And I mean, I know that some of those guys are getting treated a little bit better by the voters, but I mean, to just dismiss the entire era is kind of, burning the innocent with the guilty. And I'm not saying that those players are necessarily innocent, but I think that just dismissing their chances goes against the spirit of the entire thing. Plus, I love Jeff Bagwell. I'm a huge Bagwell guy.
Well, when it comes to Jeff Bagwell, there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. Piazza, there most definitely is. He admitted to it in his biography. But again, as I mentioned, the comments that I mentioned last week, that he is the gray line. Because when he took them, they were legal, so he wasn't cheating. So you can't, ding him on that. Biggio, there's hardly anything out there. And with Bonds and Clemens, you can make the argument they were Hall of Famers before the acquisitions even began. So what are these voters going to do? Because not everyone's going to give up their vote. Pnoles, what do you think these voters are going to do for the next 5 to 10 years when the ballots have nobody but steroid-era players on them?
I honestly can't see people getting any less stubborn than they are right now unless can you really see them having a change of heart? I kind of just don't see it happening. They've kind of taken these aggressive stances, and I mean, nobody in the public eye or certainly like a media writer wants to be viewed as like a flip-flopper on this. I don't know. I guess I got to hope that like efforts like what Deadspin did with Dan Le Batard this year, and I was completely supportive of that, and I guess that they're already trying to get a line on stealing some votes next year. But yeah, I don't think that they're gonna, turn it around at all.
If I may, aren't they all though, but almost by definition flip-floppers? Just every year. I mean, it goes back to the even older argument of how is somebody not a Hall of Famer one year, but then the next year they are a Hall of Famer because they do or they don't deserve to be on a first ballot or a second ballot. I'm not saying I disagree with you, Pnoles. I'm just saying, that writers strike me as an incredibly fickle bunch of weak-minded morons for the most part that are, they're interested in making a name for themselves. And right now the hot topic at the moment is trying to keep the purity of the hall intact. And in 3 years, I think that there's going to be so much talk about this that it's going to be raked over the coals so much that it's probably going to, in my eyes, there's a good chance it becomes a non-issue in the next 3 or 4 years because all of these guys are going to have question marks next to them. Did he? Didn't he? How much of what he did is all natural ability, and how much of it is chemically enhanced, and all that old news. So I mean, personally, I don't think it's. I have a hard time. I have a hard time seeing these guys that are on this hard line. No, absolutely not. I'm not going to let this guy in. Not on my watch. I'm a protector of the sanctity of the hall. I think they're going to creatively find ways to flip flop to the other side to let these question marks in, and they're all going to be right there at, in Cooperstown the year that they do elect Bonds in, and the year they do elect Clemens in, and they're going to write about how honestly they're probably going to take up the stance like, oh well, Bonds was a Hall of Famer before he started, but before he got involved with Balco and this, that, and the other thing. And it, yeah, I flip floppers. It's the nature of the beast. Whatever's going to sell whatever rag they're working for.
If that happens, I'm gonna be pissed.
Be prepared to be pissed, my friend.
Oh, I know, but as someone that wanted to get into the sports broadcasting industry, I've always, when I was going through it, neutral as humanly possible. And there was a sudden shift, I want to say around 2008, 2009, in where it was all about eyeballs and attention. And if you kind of watch SportsCenter back from those days, about 4 or 5 years ago, you can kind of start seeing the change that they went through, with cold pizza and then cold pizza becoming First Take with Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless. Today it's all about noise. It's all about how much noise I can generate, how many viewers are reading my blog or my video, or how many people are following me on Twitter.
Oh, absolutely.
The more noise I can make, the more money I can make. Now, a lot of these baseball writers are still beat writers. Can we even trust these guys to make sure that they're doing the jobs they're supposed to be doing day in, day out on reporting most recent baseball news? And is it actual fact? Is it factual? And I guess I'll start with you, Hazy, on that comment.
I don't know, Sly. No. Yes. I
guess I can't trust them to do a column. Or,
no, exactly.
Okay,
yeah,
it's not necessarily to trust them as a column. It's not about trust. Their columns would mean nothing to me because what their views on baseball, I would think, are, weird or goofy.
Well, you're talking about you're talking about columnists versus beat guys, though, and I understand that there's some crossing between those lines, but I think with columnists, you're talking about a lot of guys that used to work the beat and used to have all these contacts in the locker room, and a lot of these guys are guys that have beef with the players that are in question now, and that was a big question about with Frank was he was a bit chilly with the media in his day. Was that gonna be a thing that came back to hurt him now with these guys that were at his locker every day back in '93, and now 10, 15 years, 20 years later down the line, these are the guys that are getting their daily voice out there in
Right.
the Times or in the Trib, and I don't trust them. I don't trust them to preserve the sanctity of the game or to have a fair voice in any of it.
Well, okay,
they're trying to move columns.
Okay, so maybe not necessarily a columnist. How about someone like Ken Gurnick, the Dodgers beat writer? That was the first one to publicly say, I will not vote for any players during the steroid era, and got chastised throughout social media and from other writers as well. Some, backed him up, be like, hey, he's got to vote, he's earned it, he's earned his opinion, and you can't blame a guy for stating his opinion out there about how he's not going to vote during an era. And some people find it to be extremely irresponsible as far as a baseball voter. Okay, he's given up his baseball vote. He states that he will not be voting anymore in the future. So I guess that's a way that he's taken a stand of not voting for any players during the steroid era.
They can't take it away from him, right?
You can, but you got to go through a hearing. So the whole Dan Le Batard thing is they're not even following their own rules about taking the vote away from him. There is a due process that they're just not following. But with Ken, he follows the Dodgers every day, and this will be a nice segue to our next topic about Masahiro Tanaka. But when Gurnick goes out there every single day now following Dodgers baseball and becoming a source for news out of the Dodgers camp, I mean, if you think baseball is tainted and you've been writing for so long and, one of the honors of being a baseball writer is to vote for the Hall of Fame, then Pnoles, why the hell is Ken Gurnick still writing about the Dodgers if he thinks the game is tainted? Wouldn't he continue to take a moral stand and then leave his post as being a Dodgers beat reporter and start writing for another sport or take on another job?
Well, I guess he's just kind of splitting hairs, and maybe one thing he perceives is that the steroid era maybe has come to a close. Maybe he feels that the game's been cleaned up a little bit. The other side of the coin is that just because he feels the game is tainted, maybe he just still feels as compelled to report on things and not necessarily just completely do a career switch because some guys decided to cheat.
Yeah, it's funny that you made the comment that he may think the steroid era is over. Unfortunately, there's evidence contrary to that. At 60 Minutes just did their weekly about biogenesis, and Alex Rodriguez, the news coming out that he's suspended for the entire season.
I think I failed biogenesis in high school. I'm not sure.
No, for me, it's just curious. There are, these voters taking a moral stand, and I look in the way of, okay, you know what? If you don't like the way that baseball is or it's going to be, then don't write about it. But unfortunately, there are a lot of voters that haven't been writing about baseball for many years, and in some cases decades, and they still have a vote.
They're still voting. Yeah, that's writing about the World Series of Poker, and now they're not, and they still get a vote in the Hall of Fame.
Right. So so I guess I digress. And speaking about the Dodgers beat reporter, I think this is a nice segue. Moving away from the Hall of Fame to what is the baseball world is really focused on is who is going to sign Masahiro Tanaka, the next rising star from Japan, pitcher, 25 years old. And for many White Sox fans, this is something that you kind of pay attention to see what team he may land on. But earlier this week, we learned that Rick Hahn, Kenny Williams, and Robin Ventura are on their way to Los Angeles and meeting with Masahiro Tanaka and his representatives to pitch him on the idea of joining the Chicago White Sox. I'll start with you, Pnoles, first. When it comes to the possibilities of Masahiro Tanaka on a scale of 0 to 100%, what are the White Sox realistic chances of landing him?
Oh, geez, I'm really bad at this kind of prognostication. I'd have to give my honest opinion, I think it's probably somewhere in the 10% or lower range. I just feel like, we've heard conflicting reports on whether the Dodgers are super interested in, not letting anybody outbid them, and if with this whole A-Rod thing, there's a chance that the Yankees could have some extra money freed up. I think there's just going to be a lot of top bidders that are, a little bit more desperate to win right away than the White Sox, that are probably going to throw their hats into the ring and bid pretty aggressively. Now, I don't really know how the Sox would. If the price gets up to like the $100 million range or something like that, that would easily represent the biggest contract in team history. And I know Abreu was the big splash earlier this year, and I don't know, maybe there's money in reserves, but I don't know. I don't see it happening. I would really love it to happen, but it just seems like there's a lot working against the Sox in this aspect.
AD, what are your thoughts? Do you think the Sox have an honest chance, or I should say honest, realistic chance of landing Tanaka?
Well, they're in the door. They have the chances there, and they can make a compelling case, I think, to him and his agent. But I think more importantly than that, that would be if they were somehow able to pull this off, it would be a clear sign, I think, to free agents after 2014 that the Sox are ready to compete, and that the rebuild is over at that point. I'd say, retooling, restructuring, whatever you want to call it. If they pull this off this off season, then it's on in 2015. Essentially, you're going to see them making a concerted effort to bring in a left fielder, bring in a catcher, bring in a DH. Depending on what they want to do with Viciedo. I don't know if those are internal fixes or if that's something free agency via trade, what have you. this would be the team, shifting into the next gear, saying, okay, 2014, maybe we'll catch lightning in a bottle, probably not,
right.
but 2015, that window's, that window is there. That's the true start of that window, and it's going to start closing after that, and they need to start making that move. So, yeah, I think that I don't disagree with Pnoles saying that there's probably a 10% or lesser chance, but there's 30 teams in the league, so that puts them right there. I'd say ahead of 20, 25 other teams. Maybe they don't make the kind of Dodgers Yankees kind of move, and Yankees don't even get me started on the Yankees having money cleared up because of the A-Rod thing, because that's a whole other heap of bullshit. But
Yeah.
but yeah.
It really is. And we'll talk about the other teams that are interested in Tanaka, and if it's not the White Sox that sign him, who else do you think would? But let's go over what Tanaka's done. He's 25 years old. He's been pitching full-time for 7 years in Japan. Over his 7 years, obviously win-losses, you really can't judge it, but he's 99-35 and over 172 games started. He only has 1,300 innings on that arm on a professional level, pitching-wise. His K rate for his career is 23.2%. That's right along the lines of Chris Sale. Would he be able to transfer that over to the big leagues? Not sure. His career ERA is 2.30. But this, I think, is the reason why not going to sabermetrics, because we know not everybody, as far as every general manager of every team, really believes in that. Last season in Japan, he was 24-0 with an ERA of 1.27. And I think that's what caught a lot of people's eyes. And a lot of people are saying, this guy's better than Yu Darvish. Definitely better than Matsuzaka, Daisuke, a couple of years before Darvish. Casey, do you think this is the best Japanese pitching prospect to come to the United States since Hideo Nomo did it in the early 90s?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Japanese leagues, they kind of, when they're kind of shaking it out, they're roughly equivalent talent-wise to around AAA, right? That's what I mean.
I don't know.
I thought I've heard something like that.
What are your thoughts, Pnoles, on that?
On the quality of the Japanese leagues, I guess that's probably a good question to ask somebody like Larry. I can just see from the hitters that go over there, like the Kevin Menches of the world, who try to go and make their money over there.
Mm-hmm.
They're paid a little bit more like stars. That makes me. I guess like if you're looking for a quad A masher, that's like somebody like Kevin Mench. But I don't know. I think that you can't really trust like the video game numbers, and I definitely, from scouting reports that I've read, it doesn't sound like he's got better stuff than Yu Darvish or anything like that. But obviously, like, some guy's 24-0 over there. You can throw out the sabermetrics right there. He's obviously doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so Clay Davenport of Baseball Prospectus, crunching the numbers, states that the league is quadruple A, step above triple A. He feels that it's a step below Major League Baseball. But, with quadruple A and for the White Sox, you could start every day right now.
I give you Dan Johnson.
Yeah.
Well, then answer your question then, Sly. I don't think that. If he's putting up, numbers, in the sale range in what's roughly the equivalent of 4A, 4A baseball, I think then you do have somebody that you can slot in ostensibly as a number 2 or 3, and not be afraid of what you're going to get every fifth day.
Right.
I don't think he's an ace necessarily, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if he's your number 1 guy going forward, but I think you're going to get above quality quality starter there. So yeah, I absolutely I think he's one of the top, if not one of if not the best in the last 20 years.
Because Yu Darvish has been outstanding for Texas. and we'll chat about Texas in a quick second here, but let's talk about if the White Sox were to land Tanaka and you slot him as the number 2 starting pitcher behind Chris Sale. What are your thoughts would happen to the rest of the rotation? Who's in, who's out, who should be dealt, or should the White Sox continue to shop? I'll start with you, Pnoles, because I know that you, as far as the comments this week, made the comment that starting pitching staff may not be as strong as we think it is.
Yeah, and that's I kind of made some arguments about that in the comments the other day. I really do believe that the starting pitching for the White Sox, it's not, I wouldn't say like it's a weakness, but it's also definitely not a significant strength that could make up for weaknesses, let's say, on the offensive side of things. I think that if Tanaka did come to the team, that I think that at this point, they've pretty much got to start Eric Johnson in the rotation, and obviously nobody's going to displace John Danks, so I think that Polino would at least find himself the odd man out at the beginning of the year. And I do believe that Tanaka does represent, it would be a massive upgrade for, I think, any team, but particularly for the Sox, because as of right now, I don't have a lot of faith in John Danks at the moment. I mean, of course, the further he gets removed from this injury, like the stronger he's going to get. But, until he proves that he can either, he has a little bit reduced velocity, until he proves that he can work around that, or until he gets some of that old stuff back, it's going to be tough to trust him. Polino's obviously an injury risk, and other than like a 7-start blip in 2012, it's tough to know if he's going to be able to like step up and be a consistently good starter. And
right,
Eric
the guy's
Johnson,
got good stuff. You can't. When it comes to Polino, the guy's got good stuff. But the White Sox, they really need a pitcher that can pitch 25 games. So start 25 games this year in the back end of the rotation.
Kupel fixed him. It's all right.
If he blows out his elbow, don't worry, Coop's got there too. So, but that's my thoughts on Polino, because you make a lot of fair points. Eric Johnson, I think you're on the bandwagon because you look just like the guy.
No, I like him a lot. I think that he's a question mark, just like most prospects would be question marks. But yeah, I mean, I obviously like Eric Johnson. That last of 12 doesn't stop referring to me as him in the comments.
Yeah, well, you do. You just look like the guy. I don't know what to say, but.
Has anybody ever seen the two of them in the same room at the same time? That's the question.
Weird. Let's talk about Jose. So let's chat about Jose Quintana. Okay. This question's 2 parts, and I guess we'll start off with the first part, Hazy. If Tanaka was added, do you think a rotation of Sale, Tanaka, and Quintana can compete with Detroit's top 3 of Verlander, Scherzer, and Sanchez?
Yes, I mean, if baseball was just taking your top 3 starting pitchers and comparing the backs of their baseball cards and putting them out on the mound and letting them throw, then that's great. But unfortunately, that's not what baseball is. I mean, your match, you've got to match up offense to offense and bullpen to bullpen and bench to bench, and the bullets just aren't there for the White Sox yet. I mean, it's that's what 60%. 60% of your starts are going to be coming from those guys. But you've got one of the best hitters in history. Slotted in that 3rd slot for Detroit. I mean, until the White Sox start making more leaps and bounds with the offense and the lineup, then it's not going to matter what the top of the rotation looks like, because you're essentially going to be ask them to be perfect every day. That's not going to last a whole season.
Well, Pnoles, isn't that what we have to expect for Chris Sale from now on until the rest of rotation? Because I look at White Sox kicking the tires in Tanaka as a statement of saying we are not 100% confident in starting rotation going into the year. And maybe we're not as confident as Quintana really being our number 2 starter. So what are your thoughts about he's making the comment that you're going to have to rely on your starting pitching staff to be perfect all the time. And with Sale, let's be honest, other than having 3 or 4 bad games in a year, if he starts 34, 35 games, in order for the White Sox to win more than they did in 2013, yeah, he's got to be spot on. But can the rest of the rotation pick up more slack into next season? Or do the Sox really have to think about pushing Katana back as number 3 guy and find a better number 2 option than him?
Well, I guess it's just there's a lot of luck involved in baseball. I mean, like I said, Danks, Johnson, Polino, they're kind of question marks, but I mean, sometimes the coin comes up heads and you wind up with some guys that perform really well for you. I mean, coming into this season, obviously the hopes aren't great, but I mean, this is also coming from somebody who wrote a fan post dedicated to how quick the turnaround might be. And I don't know necessarily if the starting rotation needs to be, quite as perfect as what we saw last season. I mean, realistically, since I guess you can't necessarily call Garcia an upgrade over Alex Rios just yet, but I mean, last year was like the worst offense in the American League, and we've already, made an upgrade, or what definitely could be an upgrade at 4 places around the diamond. I think they're going to be better at first base. They're going to be better at DH. They're going to be better at third base, and I guess center field, I mean, it'll be better defensively, but I mean, by shifting De Aza over to left, and I do think that if he's still around, I doubt he will be, but I think he should still be playing over Viciedo. I think that the rotation wanted to be as perfect as we might have thought.
Well, there's a lot of luck in baseball. Katana is the one guy who is not very lucky. Led the league in no decisions last year.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, you could pretty much just call him Jose No Decision Katana. He's going to give you 6 to 7 innings. And if you got a lead, White Sox are going to blow it. If he's losing, White Sox are coming back. He's not getting the win, though. I feel with the White Sox going to LA, it's a good sign for fans, knowing that truly any top free agent out there, they're going to go after him. But I think it's also another sign that maybe Han is not 100% comfortable with the starting rotation that's going to be out there in 2014, as there are quite a few question marks. And completely honest, I mean, Johnson's a prospect. Danks has passed the injury problem, so is Polino. If those guys go down, who can step up? Last year, the guy that stepped up from the bullpen, starting every 5th day, was Hector Santiago, and it doesn't really look like the White Sox have that option if someone were to go down early in the year. Knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen. But back to Tanaka. If the White Sox don't sign him, who do you think will? New York gets the money freed up from the A-Rod mess, which is unbelievable. LA has came on and said, we are going to outbid anybody and everybody. Seattle's throw their hat in the ring, and, they have very good relations with Japanese baseball thanks to the many years Ichiro Suzuki played for the Seattle Mariners. And really bad news for the Rangers. Derek Holland is out for the first half of the season. So they are very desperate and to get someone into that rotation. Who do you think? And let's not forget about the Cubs, but I've not really taken them that serious as suitors for Tanaka. So who do you think? If it's not the White Sox, where do you think Tanaka will land?
New York.
New York.
My vote's with New York. I think that their recent breakout of a lack of obvious success in postseason performance is going to rattle a few cages over there, and not just with the A-Rod money being freed up, but with Cano, any of the money that they may have had earmarked for Cano being gone. And I think it's the clearest. I'd say it's the clearest landing spot for him.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you, man. If I was any of his representatives, I would stay away from New York. 1, they did not treat Hideki Arabu very well when he was in New York. 2, that infield sucks with a capital S. The third base options, the second base options, and a 39-year-old shortstop on one good ankle. Woof. That is not a very good infield.
Money
I think the
talks. Money
Yankees are in
talks.
trouble. If money talked, Cashman would reverse his comments this week saying, I am looking for a major league ready third baseman, not signing Scott Sizemore to possibly be a solution, and maybe think about Dan Johnson and Brian Roberts. I mean, this infield is really bad, and it makes me as a White Sox fan feel better. Pnoles, where do you think Tanaka will land if he does not land with the White Sox?
Well, I think that a lot of the candidates you've mentioned are pretty much the ringleaders. I could definitely, I'll stop it right there. I'm going to say Dodgers. I'm just throwing it out there. I think he's going to go to Dodgers.
I think if Seattle was really serious about it and ownership approved it, I think he's going to Seattle. And I do think it is about the relationship between a team and Japan. And it's a great backup just in case that they can't re-sign Felix Hernandez in a couple of seasons. They can let him go, or they can move him. But if they were to take on Tanaka, that would drastically change that team. After adding Robinson Cano and Tanaka, it doesn't mean that they're going to win the AL West because, quite frankly, nobody saw the Athletics come last year, and they won that division easily. And they still may be the favorites anyways. But if the White Sox don't sign them, I'm going to go with the dark horse. I'm going with Seattle. So we got to vote for the Dodgers, we got to vote for the Yankees, and we got to vote for the Mariners. We'll see how it ends up coming along. And then to wrap up as far as our podcast this week, it's going to be our random tidbits, as hopefully we'll have a new one. It's Homesick Alien came back from their Europe trip. I'll be looking forward to that fan post. And Hazy, I'll start with you. You tweeted at me about the douche nozzle quarterback from San Francisco. That is a direct quote, by the way. In the NFL, talk a little about football. I think this is, the best four teams, especially the best two teams from each conference, are lined up against each other. Denver Broncos against the New England Patriots, the Seattle Seahawks against the San Francisco 49ers. What are your true views on Colin Kaepernick, Hazy?
I think he's a stand-up individual, a great person. I think he was raised right by his parents. No, I'm kidding. I think he's an absolute douchebag who I hope nothing but bad things happen to him next week against Seattle, and that's coming from someone who absolutely hates the Seahawks too. This NFL playoff, as a Bears fan, I went into it kind of with kind of that I just don't care. God, right. I invested so much emotionally into the end of that season and into the Bears season. I was convinced I wasn't going to care, but here I am today arguing with my wife about how much time I'm spending in front of the television watching these games that I don't even really care about. But there it is in front of me, and I can't look away. And at the end of the day, it's Manning against Brady again. Who cares? And it's Pete Carroll gag me against douchebag Kaepernick, and I'm left rooting for Denver just because of I hate Peyton Manning less than all of the other people that are involved in the playoffs at this point. So there you go.
Well, Jim Harbaugh was a former Bears quarterback.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What did he do with the Bears? It's.
Yeah, that is true. Well,
so was Peter Tom Willis, but you don't see me following his career, his post Bears career with any great fervor. So,
well, here's my soapbox moment with the NFL as a whole. Actually, football as a whole. I think football as a sport is broken. There's a great Outside the Lines article about Heads Up Football, the campaign that the NFL started up and is funding 100%, and it is simply just a marketing ploy that kids are not tackling better, injuries are not going down. It's the same thing the NFL is doing with Breast Awareness Month for October, making all these pink jerseys and all these pink shirts and making all the players wear pink gloves and coaches wearing pink hats. money is really not going to cancer research at all. It's particularly funding the NFL. And watching the game today, the officials are extremely inconsistent, and I think it is because they don't know what to call anymore. There were a couple penalties against the Panthers today that easily should have been called against the 49ers, especially headbutting, which, that's a great way to get an instant concussion, having been a football player and suffered 5 of them. Carolina did it. They got a penalty. San Francisco does it a couple of times, no penalties. Cam Newton gets sacked, and it looks like a violent hit because it is a violent hit, and there's a roughing the passer penalty. I just really feel like the game of football is broken on all lines because we don't know as a society on what we're supposed to do anymore to ensure that the game is played at a high level, but also at a safe level. And Pnoles, I know you're a big Notre Dame guy. What are your thoughts about that comment as far as the state of football?
Well, I kind of wished I would have seen the game today because I noticed someone post on Facebook today about the horrible officiating in that game, and sadly I haven't really tuned into a lot of the NFL playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mostly just watch the regular season for fantasy purposes. I really wish I could comment better on that, but I think that there's people much more knowledgeable about the NFL and how everything works than me. If that's true what you're saying about like the Breast Cancer Awareness Month and the money not going to that, then I think that's terrible. But besides that,
it's awful.
Well, it's like Livestrong. You think that money, all those years buying yellow bracelets, was going to cancer research? No. 95% of that was paying the people and Nike to produce the damn things, to market them, and to promote Lance Armstrong. It sucks. You have to be worried about charities. You have to be worried about, marketing events or anything. It's kind of a bummer, but I brought that point up because with Heads Up Football, it's supposed to train little kids to be better at the Pop Warner age and tackling and playing safer, but it's just not happening. So for me, I mean, baseball's always been my number one sport, and I am a 49er fan, and the 49ers are a very violent team, and they hit you in the mouth. Next weekend, not so much for the Denver-New England game, but if you watch the San Francisco-Seattle game, these two teams are what's wrong with the state of football. And they're going to smack each other, and they're going to do dirty things to one another because they do not like one another. But that's the problem with the game of football. That's why it's not safe, and that's why these guys, when they're in the mid-40s to 50s, they can't remember a damn thing, and they just develop really bad tendencies, brain diseases that we don't know about until they do something really bad, like Junior Seau. I just think, you make the comment about football and about how Colin Kaepernick is a douche nozzle, and I'm watching these games, and football is always going to be number one in this country for a while, but I wonder how long a while is, and I just feel like the sport itself is broken.
If I had a son, I would have a hard time guiding him down the play football path. Those are really big guys going really, really fast right at each other for 60 minutes. And I like my children too much to encourage that sort of thing. If somebody else wants to do it, that's great, because I really like watching it, and it's a lot of fun, and it's amazing to watch because they're so good at destroying each other. But I don't want anybody that I like doing it, because I don't know. It's not worth it. At the end of the day, it's your that's your life. That's your mind. And you brought up Junior Seau. You see what can happen when you get your bell rung, just that one time too many, and that's it's the rest of your life. Football isn't forever. These guys are done no later than 35, unless your name's Vinny Testaverde. You have to protect yourself, and you have to protect your loved ones, and it's it's not worth killing yourself over a game. It will never be it will never be worth that much.
Yeah. Do you think these guys fully understand the risks before turning pro, or do you think they just kind of see the dollar signs and just say, "I'm in"? That's it.
I absolutely think it's the dollar signs. The dollar signs, it's the fame, and sure, a lot of these guys are it's the rag to riches thing. But I mean, sports has always been a great way for for people to get out of unfortunate circumstances and elevate their their life status, and setting up setting up their families past and future. But but at what cost? I mean, if you're going to be checked out by the time you're let's say you retire at 35, and you start to mentally check out at 42 because of the number of hits you've taken to the head over your career, and then by the time you're 55, you can't get out of bed anymore because you've got degenerative muscle conditions, and you've got bones that are fused together, and then your brain starts to go, and you don't know where you're at, and before you know it, you're trying to stab your refrigerator at 2 a.m. because you think it's trying to attack your family. Is that worth it?
That's actually a good point, Daisy. I'm glad you're on my side with that. And to wrap it up, I went and saw Lone Survivor, and a quick movie review. As last week we chatted about Wolf of Wall Street. Very good movie. Movie is about the story of one Navy SEAL, a mission that went bad, him and the team of 4 in Afghanistan, and he was, get this, the lone survivor.
Spoiler alert! Hello, come on. Some people here may not have read the book.
Right. Or they can't dissect the movie title. Marky Mark doesn't ruin the movie. I know a lot of people had fear about that. On how can this be a good movie with Mark Wahlberg in it? I think that's kind of a slight against him. He was good in the fighter.
We're past that now, aren't we?
I hope so.
We're past that with Wahlberg, right? I mean, yeah. I think he and new kid Donnie, they've both done some good things now. If past their 90s pop star careers, I think I think we're past that now.
Yeah, come on, Ted was like a work of art.
Yeah. If you take your girlfriend or you take your wife, they will cry. There's just, and how the movie ends, it was absolute silence. It was the first time I ever heard a movie theater be that quiet once the credits rolled.
Oh man.
Definitely a tearjerker. It was hard for me to fight back tears. I'm not a crier, but it's very good. I highly recommend it. If you want to go see a movie, Lone Survivor, that's your ticket. Try to avoid the 3-hour movies. As a matter of fact, we should probably reach out to HSA. We got to start prepping for maybe an Oscars-related podcast to really break down to see, what were the best movies. If the Golden Globes were happening, you were paying attention to that, Hazy?
I was. It was a gala of splendor and magnificence. Let me tell you.
I hate those people.
And the speeches were off the charts great tonight. The gowns were gorgeous. The tuxedos. It was amazing. No, I mean, I joke, but we in the Hazy household, we do get a kick out of award season for that stuff. It's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but we're big fans of movies and big fans of television. So we like comparing what we've enjoyed against what the awards go to and all that. So it's definitely something I'm going to be paying attention to. So you'll get a couple more right rail notes about those from me over the next couple of months.
Well, spoiler alert, best drama was 12 Years a Slave. Best comedy movie was American Hustle, one movie I have not seen yet. So
that's going to be in the comedy category?
Yeah.
Wolf of Wall Street was considered a comedy. Which it really is. It's dark comedy. Yeah. So, Golden Globe separates the two. But going to the Oscars, those are your front runners, 12 Years a Slave and American Hustle. So
no surprises there, I don't think so.
No surprises. But anyways, that will wrap up this week's podcast. Thank you for those that were watching. I want to thank Hazymania and Pnoles for jumping on this week. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys,
Good
great
chat.
job. Great job keeping it under 10 minutes this week, guys. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
The important stuff is within the 10 minutes. Yeah, so thank you as far as the listeners and the viewers that are either watching this video in the fan post or you have found our YouTube page, which, speaking about our YouTube page, please subscribe so you can be alerted of new podcasts as we will be hosting these every Sunday night. And if you would like to join the podcast or if you have any topics that you want us to chat about, make sure you post those in the comments below in the fan post. So
I'm going to go subscribe right now, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. For Hazymania and Pnoles, I'm Slydernelson. Thanks for watching this week, and we'll see you next week.